I'm Jerry Patterson, and I'm going to confine myself to right here in front of this table. I'm running for Texas Land Commissioner, as these two gentlemen are as well. They're friends of mine. We are all on the same page, and that is we have to end the political career of George P. Bush. We've all pledged that whoever's in the runoff, the other two are going to support, and that is a very sincere pledge. I was born in Houston. I went to Texas A&M, where I crammed a normal 4-year course into only 5 years and graduated the top 75% of my class. I entered the United States Marine Corps, served 24 years active and reserve, had a tour in Vietnam at the very end of the war, came back to Texas and was elected to the Texas Senate in 1992 unexpectedly. I was the author of the Texas Concealed Handgun Law. I was the author of the Texas Property Rights Constitutional Amendment to allow you to use your home equity as you see fit. And I was later elected as Texas Land Commissioner. Did many good things there. One of the subjects of this debate has to do with the Alamo, and there are two great accomplishments at the Alamo. When I was there, we returned the Travis letter, which left on the 24th of February, 1836. We returned it back to the Alamo for the first time in 182 years in an event that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up and tears come up in your eyes. The other accomplishment at the Alamo was I was able to convince Phil Collins to contribute his Alamo memorabilia and artifact collection to the Alamo. And I was able to get the process started in concert and in cooperative agreement with the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. I'm running, well, first of all, I had no intention of ever being on the ballot again in my life. I'm retired, I'm 71 years old, and I watched the land office essentially crater and look for someone to run that that had name ID or money, because I knew George P. Bush had $3 million in the bank and couldn't find anybody, so I found him. I believe that we're going to have him in a runoff. We're going to need your support in that runoff. And I would describe myself as a guy who never fears to say what's on his mind. I have something in common with our president. We're both 71 years old and we speak our mind. Sometimes we wish we hadn't said that, but nonetheless, we do speak our mind. I'm politically incorrect. I'm probably the only candidate on the ballot that has this flag on the back of his truck. You may not know what that is, but it's the first national flag of the Confederacy. I love history, all of history. I was the author of the bill to establish the Juneteenth Commission, to establish a monument on the Capitol grounds. So I love all of history, and I am against the retroactive, politically correct cleansing of our history. We need to depict it accurately, and that will be enough to unite us. The story, the real story, is what we need to know, not a retroactive revision and a movement of the cenotaph away from the Alamo. I'd be honored to have your vote. Give me a time here.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Vote for me, or vote for Davey, or vote for Rick. Don't vote for George P. Bush. Thank you.
Howdy, I'm Davey Edwards. I'm running for Land Commissioner. I'm from Decatur, Texas, which is just north of Fort Worth. And everybody kind of understands, maybe not, but the primary purpose of the General Land Office is to the stewardship of the sovereign lands of Texas for the permanent school fund. And the reason I say this is because I spent the last 2 decades of my life building my career and building my education around those principles. I'm a state land surveyor, a licensed surveyor in Oklahoma and in Texas, a state surveyor under the authority of the General Land Office, where we provide field notes, survey work and stuff for the land office for patent field notes, corrected field notes, 1 of 60 in the whole state. I'm also a federal surveyor. I'm 1 of 2 in Texas that has the combination of those licenses. But my master's is in, and my doctorate is in original land grant systems. I'm the only one in the nation that has all those combinations of education and professional credentials. And so what I decided to do and get into this race is because I felt like my qualifications and my credentials would be best suited for the state of Texas and the citizens of Texas in this capacity. But I'm also a 6th generation Texan. And I was generally concerned with the direction that the General Land Office was going, not only from the aspect of the reboot program that the current commissioner did to eliminate staff, eliminate 100 years of applicable experience in all the various departments that it touches in the state of Texas, but also with what was going on with the Alamo. The Alamo is a little point in the land office, but it has a huge significance to the state of Texas. And so I got into the race because I felt like we needed to change the direction that it was going, as Jerry alluded to. As soon as a politician gets in office and makes his primary goal to move to a higher office, he neglected his primary responsibilities to the state of Texas. And it had to stop. And so I jumped into the race, and I felt like I needed to do this for the citizens of Texas. And so with that being said, I have 3 boys. One's at college at A&M.
30.
I got 2 an 8-year-old in 3rd grade and a 4-year-old. And I want to build a agency that they can grow up in. And I want to provide and protect and preserve the Texas history so they can grow and respect it. So I ask for your votes. I ask for your encouragement as we move forward into the elections. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. My name is Rick Range, like home on the range. And before I start, I want to put in a word for our friend Deb over here. He failed to mention. He said he had 100+ trials before a jury and so forth. I want y'all to know this. His 2 opponents, both of them, have a grand total of 0, not a 1. So that ought to give you a clear indication of who we need to elect to the Supreme Court of Texas. So I just wanted y'all to be sure you were aware of that and spread it to everybody, please. Electing somebody with no experience is not going to be good to have on our Supreme Court. I'm behind Davey. I'm a 4th generation Texas. He's got 2 generations on me. My family has been in Dallas County, where I grew up, since 1890. I grew up in Irving, went to Irving High School, went to North Texas State up in Denton 1 year, and then I transferred out to West Texas State in Canyon. Finished up out there. I came back, moved to Garland, taught school for a few years, and then I got on the Mesquite Fire Department, where I spent 31 years as driver engineer, driving the engine, pumping the water. I also served as Spanish translator for the police and the fire departments. And then about 12 years ago, a friend I went to high school with, he's now a professional writer up in DC, working for the government in the Voice of America propaganda unit to the world. He's head of that office. But anyway, we come upon this notion about doing a book about the Alamo, and we got a contract, and so we were co-authoring this book, and it kind of expanded into the entire war for independence. So that's how I got involved in that subject, and so consequently I've made about 30 trips down here to the Alamo, and we've done all kind of research. We've done ground penetrating radar. We found the footings of the walls out in Alamo Street and Easter Street. So all kind of projects and research over the last 12 years. Well, then what happened was when, and by the way, on my background, let me mention this before I forget it. I do have qualifications in the various functions of the land office beyond just being an Alamo, quote, expert. I've been trying to be portrayed as one issue candidate, and I'm not. I've got, as I said, on the fire department, I've had experience with floods, tornadoes, disaster relief, which is one of the functions of the land office that George Bush has totally dropped the ball on,
30.
By the way. 30 seconds, okay. I've also had some similar experiences with traumatic situations like the veterans, so I'm sensitive to their plight. And my family had a 65-year-old oil company, so I grew up working in it. So that's part of the land office too, the gas and oil leases going into permanent school fund. So I feel like I've got not a land surveyor, but I know where to hire a real good one. Right? But anyway, I got involved, and then when this plan came up in April and unveiled, and we saw how bad it was, I got founded the Save the Alamo Committee and got in the race. I'll tell you more about it later. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, you're the first one, and the real questions. What conservative Republican goals are you passionate about? This goes to all 3 of you, but you start. Meaning that we have a platform that has incredibly good ideas for legislative action and governmental action. So what are your passions and goals within the Republican platform?
Well, my family has got a lack of any other better terms is we have infertility in me and my wife, and we tried various means of trying to get a family started, and nothing worked, IVF and everything like that. And it wasn't until we kind of gave up on everything and looked towards something else that we were able to adopt a 9-month-old son. And when I was growing up, I didn't think that I could ever really love anybody that wasn't a part of my blood. But when I sat there and I held that little boy in my arms, and he looked up at me one night, and his big blue eyes and gave me a big old grin, I knew right then and there that I could love a child, no matter, no regardless of anything. So for me, pro-life is very important. And I think that that would be one of the primary things that I would be an advocate for. I'm an advocate for it right now. I do what I can to protect and preserve life. I think that there are families out there just like mine that would adopt children regardless of how the mother wants to keep it or doesn't want to keep it. So I'm very passionate about that one particular subject.
Okay, Mr. Ray?
I agree with Davey on that. I'm very pro-life. I'm also very pro-Second Amendment. I'm also a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, a proud member of it. I make no hesitation saying that. And I'm totally against the removal of anybody's statue, regardless of who it is. If we take down everybody who wasn't perfect, we won't have any of them left. So the other big thing I would say about the platform is I'm really strong about immigration. And I got to tell y'all, that's really, and I'm a big supporter of President Trump ever since the day he walked down the staircase there and declared. I've worked for him, donated to him. I got to say, I'm really disappointed with what he's done with DACA. In my mind, he should have gone in there day one like he promised, canceled it, got it off the table, and done with and gone. I don't care their story, I don't care what happened. They ended up here illegally. They don't need to be here, period. And this thing of tripling what the Democrats wanted, 600,000, offered 1.8 million. When I heard that, I was driving and listening on the rail, I like ran into a tree. So I think that's a big mistake that's going to come back to really haunt him. I hope it doesn't. But that would be my one main thing is I think enforcement of immigration and getting that squared away is going to affect, it's really life or death for the future of this nation. Demographic change, and once Texas goes blue, there will never be another Republican president elected in the United States ever.
30.
So unless drastic measures are taken to turn that around, that's where we're going, and that's why I'm so strong on that matter. Also in agreement with his program about limiting who comes into this country, protecting us from terrorism. That was a whole nother fiasco that he's helping turn around. And that needs to be done too.
Mr. Patterson?
How many minutes is this?
2.
2, okay. Well, as it relates to the platform, I know where I stand, and I'll give you an example. When I was elected to the Texas legislature, I was a strong proponent of term limits. I got up there and realized that term limits just empowered the bureaucracy, the people that were there when you got there and will be there when you're gone. And so I ceased to favor term limits, but nonetheless, having run on that in my election to the Senate, I left the Senate voluntarily after 2 terms because I had promised people that's what I would do, even though I no longer agree with it. I also favor initiative and referendum. I don't know what the platform says about INR now, but it was in there when I was elected. I can tell you also, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I am not a false economy fiscal conservative like George P. Bush. George P. Bush brags about the number of employees he has cut at the Texas General Land Office, but he's hiding 75 employees in a 501c3 nonprofit called the Alamo Trust, and they are paid with state dollars. He's trying to look good. I'm pro-life. I have a 100% pro-life voting record, And as it relates to immigration, we need to secure our border by whatever means necessary. And here's one of the problems with our narrative. All we do is talk about a wall, 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 wall. And I would ask you to go and Google Santa Elena Canyon and see those vertical rock cliffs that you don't need no wall. We need to do whatever is necessary to secure our border, which will include physical barriers. It will include the boots on the ground surveillance. It will include seismic intrusion devices. It will include drone surveillance, and it will include aerial man surveillance. I'm probably the only candidate on the ballot that has actually put together a defensive position and know what you have to do. So I support absolutely 100% border security, but keep in mind that 40% of our illegals came here legally and overstayed their visa. So just physically stopping people at the border is not enough. I believe we should repeal birthright citizenship because we're one of only a few developed nations that allow that time stop. Okay. Now look, she keeps waving at me. Hi.
Okay, last of our softball questions. What issues are you this is going to start with you, Mr. Range. What issues are you championing that you believe will resonate with the electorate in such a way that you will garner support across a broad spectrum of independents, Republicans, and even some Democrats if possible?
Well, that is a softball. The Alamo. That's the most emotional, appealing issue to all the voters of Texas that I've talked to, whether they were Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Republican, whatever. The debacle and the threat that is faced by the Alamo, by the actions of George P. Bush, resonates with all of them. The problem we got right now is going into these counties, which we've all been doing, I'm finding, even to this day, 10, maybe 20% maximum of the people know anything at all about this reimagined plan. They don't even know it exists, much less all the bad things that are in it. And that's what we're up against. So many people may go in there and just vote that name, Bush, and not knowing about all these facts. And I'll mention it in my close, but that's what we got to turn around in the next week. We have got to spread that where every voter in this state knows about it, or he can slip through. And if this election is life or death for the future of the Alamo, and make no mistake about it. He's a politically correct radical. By the way, 2 weeks ago, y'all know if y'all heard this, he came out in the Bryan Eagle newspaper in favor of abolishment of Confederate Heroes Day in the state of Texas. So he's the same mindset as that radical mayor and that radical city council that want to get rid of the cenotaph. They've already got rid of the Confederate statue in Travis Park. Now their next target's the cenotaph. So he's right in line with them. He's right in sync, regardless of how he's getting up trying to say he's a conservative and all this stuff he's trying to say. That's all hogwash. So we have got to absolutely get him into a runoff. No two ways about it.
Mr. Patterson.
We talked about the Alamo. I don't want to belabor that anymore. It's been well addressed by Davey and Rick, but there's an issue that probably wasn't a big issue here up in this part of Texas, and that is Hurricane Harvey recovery, the complete disaster that resulted in the Texas General Land Office response to that. I'll give you an example. In Louisiana, they had the Baton Rouge floods, and 4 months later they had done temporary emergency shelter in place repairs to 10,017 homes. Here in Texas, 4 months later, they had done 2. And that was not a mistake, that was not an error, that was an intentional decision by the commissioner to look like a fiscal conservative and not tap the rainy day fund. I don't know about you, but 52 inches rain in Houston, 52 inches rainy day fund, I don't know what goes together better than that. But Bush made that decision not to tap the rainy day fund and left people sleeping in their cars and sleeping in tents. All because, so he could say, I'm a fiscal conservative. This is his, I mean, I get angry thinking about this, how botched. And another reason it was botched is because when he got there, within 6 months, 12 of the key personnel at the General Land Office Disaster Recovery Division, and we did Hurricane Ike and Dolly when I was there. 12 of the key people, 6 were fired, 6 resigned before they could get fired. Also, he could say he was a fiscally conservative Republican, and he hired youngsters that have no knowledge, and they'll work for $40,000 a year when the good guys are working for $80,000. It's a false economy to look good. We have a guy that is only focused on looking good.
10 or 30
Oh,
seconds more.
that's good.
Okay.
So I'm glad Jerry brought up Hurricane Harvey because that is a huge issue, and I think that we need to address it, and it crosses all aspects of life, no matter political affiliation. We've got to make sure one of the biggest issues, and the reason that it didn't go off real well, is because of what I mentioned earlier about a reboot program whenever the current commissioner got into office. He was trying to be fiscally conservative. He eliminated top guys that had any applicable experience in those departments. And when Hurricane Harvey hit the coastline, we didn't have people in place to implement the programs to get people back in their homes, businesses back up and running. And that was the biggest issue. And instead of really getting that stuff done and everything, we had a candidate that was campaigning outside the state of Texas for his re-election in Texas. And that has got to stop. We mentioned the Alamo. That's another issue that started as soon as he got in there. I guess he didn't get the memo, don't mess with Texas. And that is the problem that came into play. We have those nonprofit groups that are not transparent to protect the liability of board members. And we've got a fiscal responsibility to the state of Texas. He said, he was quoted saying that if he doesn't get the Alamo the way he thinks it should be, then so be it. If it fails, so be it. And that's not the attitude to have to preserve our Texas heritage. Texas belongs to Texas. And that crosses all party affiliations as well.
Okay.
Let me ask one quick. Is there a better way to let you know the time? Would you rather just wait?
Just
Hold
maybe
up.
stand up, maybe.
My exercise.
She's a good looking woman.
So if I hold this, just hold a card up?
That might be better,
Does
yeah.
that help?
We just gotta look at you, and we're doing this, so.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Maybe the throw something idea was not so bad after all.
You guys are doing pretty
Get
good,
Deb's
but
hat.
There you go. That's unmistakable. Okay, first hard question, and this goes to Mr. Patterson. On the UNESCO website, they state as their goals creating global citizens, promoting cultural diversity and indigenous people, and erasing borders. One way they do this is by indoctrinating school children around the world, beginning at a very early age, to begin thinking in these terms. Taking the Alamo, which represents liberty and freedom, and promoting it as a mission with cultural diversity and not a heroic battle, deliberately diminishes what the Alamo stands for and will eventually erase what the Battle of the Alamo was all about. So tell me why the Alamo, being a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is such a good thing.
It is not a good thing, it is not a bad thing, it is essentially a nothing thing. And I'll tell you why it's a nothing thing. In order for the UNESCO or WHO or UN to have any control, any input, any sanction, there has to be some kind of agreement. There is no agreement, there is no contract, there is no memorandum of understanding. There are no restrictions and there are no requirements. The Alamo is one of the 5 missions of the San Antonio Mission Trail, and the city of San Antonio and the National Park Service wanted to seek that designation, which in effect is no different than a 4-star rating by TripAdvisor. I would just relish the opportunity if UNESCO or WHO or the UN, or for that matter, anybody else, including the city of San Antonio, were to attempt to have us do something we didn't do. And our bigger threat, actually the UN angle is kind of the bright, shiny object. Our bigger threat is the city of San Antonio. It is not UNESCO. And I will tell you that they designated us, and only they can remove that designation. It's kind of like getting Yard of the Month from your homeowners association. You get the newsletter, and you're Yard of the Month, you say, take me out of that. Well, I'm sorry. So, and I would submit to you that there's no difference in the folks up here as to what happens to UNESCO, unless UNESCO attempts to do something, and they can't, they won't. I would relish that thought. As a matter of fact, in the letter I wrote to them, allowing us, is that a stop or 30? 30. In the letter I wrote to them, I said, state sovereignty, I mentioned the Second Amendment just to tease them to see if there was something, and I told them I look forward to looking at their application. I did it was a very thick application that was essentially a history document. So that's a false issue. And it started with a guy named Alex Jones, who you may have heard of. You want to read it?
I don't have much to add to that, but I would like to point out, if you've ever read the Reimagine the Alamo Master Plan, and if you look at all the contributors to the Reimagine Plan, and you can just look down the list and see what their involvement is, what their departments are, and their advisory role, there were 2 members listed there that have World Heritage Site designations, and so indirectly, they may have some influence on this Reimagine Plan. And if you looked at what they were going to try and do with the historic context of the Alamo, it fell in line with the UNESCO criterias of, bringing down borders and being politically correct. As far as I know, there is only one significant point in time to the Alamo, and that's the Battle of 1836. And if it wasn't for the Battle of 1836, there would be several skyrise buildings right there where the Alamo is. And that is probably a fact. The other missions, they're outside the downtown area. That one is right smack in the middle of it. And the reason that it is, and the reason San Antonio is the way it is, and built around that, is because of the Battle of 1836. We need to respect that.
Mr. Ray.
Well, I agree with elements of what both gentlemen said. Let me tell y'all, I had a lot of involvement with UNESCO. When this plan was unveiled, we lobbied the legislature to try to defund it, stop the funding. Massive effort. Cut it. He had asked for 170 million. They ended up giving him 70 million, but he still didn't stop it. Then we wanted to line out a veto from the governor. That didn't happen. So when the thing came out about the glass walls and all that, I said, well, I'm going to talk to UNESCO and see if there's anything in their regulations or whatever that would help stop that fiasco. So I looked into it, and to tell you the true story, now I'm totally in favor of President Trump pulling us out of UNESCO, the United States, for various other reasons, us spending money on things we don't need to be doing, other people can do it. But as far as the Alamo issue goes, it goes good on a bumper sticker, get us out of UNESCO, but the facts of the matter are, and I looked into this greatly, that all they have is a series of, it's not rules, it's not regulations, it's guidelines or suggestions, if you will. And I talked to them, I said, what about these glass walls? Is there anything y'all can do to help stop this? And they have some good rules, and by the way, they're not rules, they're guidelines, are the exact duplicate of the U.S. Park Service, exactly the same. And I think the Park Service done a pretty good job at Gettysburg and other places. So I'll try to be real quick here. I talked to the head lady in Paris, it's over the North America and the European Cultural Unit, and she told me, and all the guidelines say is, if you're going to rebuild something and all, they do encourage it, contrary to what Bush claimed. He totally turned around the opposite of what the rules say. They say you can rebuild, but we encourage it to be with the original materials. In other words, limestone walls, not glass. But she said the bad thing is we have no enforcement power, and it even said that in the rules. No enforcement power whatsoever. So they send recommendations to U.S. Park Service. Park Service sends it to Austin. And I talked to the Park Service man in D.C. He said they can throw it in the trash. It's up to the state of Texas, the city of San Antonio. They have total power. We can do nothing. So from that regard, UNESCO really with the Alamo is a non-issue, to be frank with you.
Okay. In 2015, the United States Supreme Court gave a ruling that legalized gay marriage. On that evening, the Alamo was flooded with rainbow spotlights. I don't know about you, but as a native Texan myself, I cried. Do you believe, what are your thoughts about the appropriateness of that act? No, Sparks.
Yeah, it's inappropriate. And I have a similar episode that almost occurred on my watch, and there's a rapper, TJC, I don't know who he is, very famous rap guy, that was having these art events around the world in which they would go, had this music, they'd pull up in front of some iconic location, and they would depict video on the facade where they had planned that to do at the Alamo. And I'll tell you, there's some guys that told me about this. You know, you can say what you want about them, but the Texas nationalist movement, you know, started calling me and said, this is what's planned. And I said, yeah, sure. But I looked into it and it was planned. So believe it or not, I called a state senator from San Antonio. I said, I need to talk to the mayor, who at that time was, what's his name? Castro. And I said, I need the mayor to call me, and he needed to get the cops. I need the cops to show up and stop it. And he called me, and I told him what it was, and the cops showed up and they stopped it. There's a lot of inappropriate things that are going on there today. And to be fair, I hate to be fair to George B. Bush, but one of the elements in the Reimagine plan, which is no longer the Reimagine plan, you don't find that word, one of the elements is to expand the footprint and to get rid of the schlock and get rid of all the, the activities that occur there that are really not part of what we should be doing there. One of the few good things. Expanding the footprint is a good idea. Eliminating the carnival atmosphere is a good idea, but this example you cite is even worse than the carnival atmosphere, as was that rapper guy. I forgot his name. I'm not big into rappers.
Really?
Except candy rappers after
So the Alamo is a shrine, and it should be revered, respected as a shrine. The cenotaph is the headstone of the people that defended our liberty. It's what makes Texans Texans, and we need to protect that and preserve that. And if it means, you know, having the ability to go in there and ask those people to politely remove themselves, that's what we need to enforce. And I'm glad Jerry stepped up and did that. And I understand that there was another rock star who decided to relieve himself on the cenotaph. Those things have got to quit. We need to make sure that Texans are heard loud and proud that we revere the Alamo and we respect it.
Mr. Ring.
Yes, sir. One quick addendum on the prior question. I'll make it perfectly clear. What happened was Mr. Bush took UNESCO, turned the rules around to say exactly the opposite that they actually do say, and he made UNESCO an issue. He was trying to use it.
guidelines, not rules.
Guidelines. I'm sorry.
There are no rules.
No rules, guidelines. So the problem is not UNESCO, it's George P. Bush. I just want to clarify that. We've got to get him out. Now, on this other matter, I agree with everything that was said. It was totally inappropriate. All these things are inappropriate. The current plan calls for closing Alamo Street. I would go further, and you know, you got Euston Street running east to west, which cuts off the whole northern 35% of the Alamo compound, because that thing went all the way back past the Indigo Hotel back there. So you're still not going to give people a true picture of the size and dimension of this thing if you stop at Euston Street. And in effect, you got a 6-lane freeway running through there, right through the middle of the Alamo Plaza. So I think that needs to be added to the plan. They need to shut that street also. Instead of shutting Crockett down here, which is not even within the Alamo, you could leave that one open. And then you got Travis on the north. So you'd have east-west arteries going around. And they've done that before. During some of the celebrations, the fiestas, they've closed those same streets. So it is doable. I think that needs to be part of the plan. Close Euston Street and Alamo Street. And it shouldn't take any $17 million to do it like they're planning. You know, if they close one half, the eastern prong of that, like 20 years ago, well, they used 4 flower pots, nice big ceramic flower pots on each end of the street, got pretty plants in them and all. So with 8 flower pots, you could do the same thing over here, and that's $2 million per flower pot, by the way. So that just shows you the amount of money that's being just thrown away into this thing, going into whose pockets. It's turned into the biggest slush fund boondoggle in the history of the state of Texas.